This is a reply to the Byzantine, I'm assuming named after the Byzantine Empire. This is a meeting from MUFON in Los Angeles, California in 2003. Obviously we have compiled considerably more data on Planet X since then, but this is kind of like a cradle-to-grave primer. Now, this is an excerpt from a 2-hour tape, and obviously I can't squeeze a 1.5 to 2 hour tape into 10 minutes. But I will give you this little bit of a clip so that you can see it, and I can either give you a link or maybe do an expose on it later on. But it's a cradle-to-grave primer. The way to describe it would be anything you wanted to know about Planet X but was afraid to ask, basically. And I will get this to you starting immediately. Here we go. Evil must be punished.
The data that I'll be showing tonight is the most current that we have for the topic of a Planet X, and then also divulging into the research and information as bequeathed by Zecharia Sitchin, and showing some artifacts that I've been able to acquire and the story that comes along with them as we go. Tonight, basically, what I'm going to do is, again, just share information relating to a Planet X. I am taking somewhat of a broad stroke in that some of the information I'm going to be discussing tonight, it does help to have somewhat of a foundation of understanding of topics such as Nibiru, Planet X, or the work of Zecharia Sitchin. So I'd strongly recommend, which I'll talk about in the end, that you visit the website xfacts.com or use the resources that I'm going to cite to learn about this information on your own. I can only highlight as much of the finer points as possible, but there is obviously a lot of data to go through. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Curtis, next slide, please. So again, what we're going to be looking at is some of the current research for the topic of a Planet X. There has been a lot of research done through mainstream science in detecting a planet or another large body beyond Pluto, and many theories abroad as to what effects or signs we might have to prove that a Planet X does exist. Next slide, please. So anyone who's familiar with the story, or the saga, I should now say, of the Planet X information was aware of the fact that in the early 80s, some of the most esoteric research actually started to come out on this topic, and we, through the advances of modern science, were using a telescope at the time. One of them was the infrared astronomical satellite, and it went out there and took pictures. And basically what happens is we have a whole system of satellites in orbit now, which I'll get into. But this one, at the time, was another super-cooled telescope detecting ranges of infrared light from very, very distant and dark objects. For instance, we have things that are called brown dwarfs that are basically like our sun, but it's a failed sun, so it's a very dark, and at some point some of these turn into a very cold mass and are just floating around out in space and are very hard to detect. So they invented telescopes that are super cooled, sitting out in space, that can detect below freezing temperatures and actually penetrate dust clouds and see objects that you wouldn't actually be able to see without any visible light. Next slide, please. Some of you also might be familiar with seeing this diagram on the internet. I also have yet to confirm the authenticity, but this is from the Encyclopedia Britannica edition of New Science and Technology. And this diagram is specifically talking about the Pioneer 10 probe. And if you'll notice, I'm not sure if there's a date listed on here. Yes, here you see at the bottom. But right around in the early 80s, this information started to come out and become public knowledge. And at that time, the Encyclopedia Britannica documenting this did make some very interesting notations, if in fact this is an authentic diagram. You'll notice that, and I should have asked if anyone in the audience has a laser pointer. I didn't bring mine tonight. Yeah. Oh, look at that. They do have one. I don't want to keep walking over here and losing camera focus. But as he's bringing that over, so you'll notice that if you look closely, you'll see that there's the Earth, and you'll see the trajectory of the two probes. But interestingly enough, aside from sighting our sun, you'll see that there's at the way very top there's a dead star 10 billion miles out, or does it say 50 million? 50 billion. They're citing a dead star, which very interestingly enough, this has just been coming out in the last decade, that solar systems could actually be binary, that most solar systems imaged by Hubble have 2 stars. So this was pretty interesting to find, let alone be able to authenticate its information. But as we go on to the next slide, Curtis, the reason why this was being probably extolled in the encyclopedia at that time is there was actual research going on in the early 80s all the way up until the early 90s. One of the lead astronomers that's famous for doing Planet X research is Dr. Harrington, shown here on the bottom left. In the early 80s, Dr. Harrington was the lead astronomer for the Naval Observatory held in Washington, basically NASA's headquarters. And he was one of the lead astronomers at the time doing data based on the perturbations of the outer planets, that he theorized that there should be another planet out there. Meaning, when we started doing mathematical calculations on the outer planets like Uranus and Neptune, they noticed that there was a slight pull being exerted on the planets to suggest that there's some large object out there influencing the planets. That was the theory at the time. Now, the idea that this extrasolar planet, or a 10th planet, a body out there is causing perturbations on the outer planets, and that's how we would look for it, that's not actually the latest research that they're using to look for a Planet X. It's actually more infrared-based and using telescopes. So at the time, this was the latest model for understanding a Planet X. It's a little outdated now, and it's not quite accepted by mainstream science. But interestingly enough, many of the things that we talk about aren't accepted by mainstream science, and in fact, all the models that mainstream science are prognosticating don't include all the information that we're still trying to figure out, how Earth's formation came about and this idea of another planet. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Alrighty. Like I said, this is just a clip of it, and I will try and provide you a link so that you can watch the whole. I think it's like an hour and a half or 2-hour presentation. But like I said, it goes into minute detail on Planet X, and that should satisfy any and all questions you have. Even though it was put out in 2003, I guarantee you it will answer any questions you might have. And I can't believe you would have any questions after that, but if you do, feel free to contact me. Alrighty?